I want to start off by talking about how weird this opening episode was. The fact that this episode starts off immediately after the events of season 1. However, the weird part is, in the show, it's been 5 months since the season 1 finale, but to Mark and the others, almost no time has passed. They were still in the middle of the chaos that they had at the end of season 1. And last thing Mark remembers was being in his sister's house and seeing the picture of Miss Casey, aka his Audi's wife. Next thing you know, he's back in the office, he's back in Lumen. The first face he sees is Mr. Milchek, and everything is different. Miss Corbell is gone, Mr. Milchek is now in charge, and Mark found himself in his office back in MDR, but his new co-workers are not the people that he's used to. It's a whole new cast of characters, almost as though everyone he knew got replaced. His new team consists of Gwendolyn Y, Dario, who doesn't speak any English, and most importantly and most notably, Mark W. So now there's 2 Marks. All of this is just weird. Mr. Milchek taking over from Miss Corbell, and Mr. Milchek's replacement, the one who took over his position as the assistant, is a young teenage girl named Miss Wang. With all that being established, let's talk about just exactly what happened in the 5 months since the season 1 finale. But before we do that, we have to go back to the season 1 finale. More specifically though, Helly's storyline, because she was the one that was supposed to expose what Lumen did, and she did on a public platform, which caused Lumen not only to fire Miss Corbell for inappropriate behavior, and we're going to talk about her inappropriate behavior later on, but it also caused Lumen to implement a bunch of new reforms, like asking you guys to remember to click the subscribe button to try to save their public image. It seems like to me is that whatever Lumen's doing, whatever rebranding PR stunt they're doing, it's working. Or is it? Because Mr. Milchek said something very important. He said Mark's Audi begged to return, and Mark was the only one who returned. That means Irvin, Dylan, and Helly's Audis did not want to come back, which is why Mark was the only one there. However, what I find very interesting is what if, just what if, Lumen actually never let them go and they were being kept on the perpetuity floor? Stay with me and think about it for a second. I can't think of any reason why Dylan's character would leave his family behind, why Irvin's Audi would come back here after everything's been exposed to the public, unless it hasn't been exposed to the public. Because they live on the Severance floor, they will never know what's going on in the outside world, and Mr. Milchek can tell them anything. Even though this season he's coming off with a different persona, he's actually more agreeable and more likable. Don't get me wrong, Mr. Milchek, as weird as he looks, he's always been more likable than Miss Corbell, but he does tote the company line, and he was the one who tackled and stopped Dylan at the season 1 finale, making sure that they didn't expose what was going on with Lumen. So that means he's a company man through and through. I personally am not buying his leadership or his new reforms. And let's talk about just what those reforms and his new approach are. If you guys remember back in season 1, everything was being watched. All the characters were watched 24/7, but now there's no cameras anywhere and there's no microphones. But there's something we know that they don't know. Remember back in season 1 when Helly was working on her computer, Mr. Milchek and Miss Corbell could see her on the other side. They could see what she was doing. So even though there's no visible cameras, the cameras still exist on the computer monitors, which makes a lot of sense if you think about what Mr. Milchek said to the characters after he showed them that new orientation. The fact that he gave them a choice to stay or leave. The choice to work for Lumen was taken out of their Audi's hands and given to the innies. Dylan, Irvin, Helly, and Mark were given the option. If they want to leave, he'll let them go. But to me, again, that's just another ruse, because the way he told them to confirm that they were staying is if they logged onto their computers, he would know that they decided to work for them. If they decided not to log on, he would know that they quit. That's when I caught him and I realized he might have removed all the visible cameras, but the cameras inside of the computer monitors are still there. That's why he wanted them to open the computers and get back to work so he could make sure they were there. And the only way that makes sense is if the cameras are still there and he's able to visually verify them working on their computers. But before I dive too deep on what this could mean for the characters as well as season 2, I want to go back to Mark's new team. It's the fact that they came from another MDR department, because when Mr. Milchek was giving Mark and the old crew the new orientation video, it said something very important. It said that Lumen had over 200 Severance offices across the world. That means this is a global operation. At one point, I thought this was just a small contained social experiment, but it seems to be the overall corporate mandate of Lumen to make Severance a global thing. It's almost like the McDonald's effect, the McDonaldization of corporate America almost. But back to the team. After Mark spent about a day with his new team, he realized this is not where he wants to be. He wrote a secret note about what was going on in Lumen and tried to frame Mark W. And he tried to sneak out with the note. However, when he came back to work the next day, Mr. Milchick had the note. And that got me thinking, how did he get the note? Unless we're missing something here. Because let's think about this for a second. Every time they go in the elevator, their memories kind of fade out. When they come to, they're back in the elevator and they're stepping out ready for work. So we never see the real transition from what happens when the innie goes in the elevator and the outie comes out. For Mr. Milchick to have gotten that note off of Mark, that means he had to search his body. And remember, he said there was no cameras and no microphones. What if whenever they go in the elevator, before they step outside, because their mind is being warped and messed with, they're put in a space of suspended animation almost, and that's when they get patted down, and that's how they make sure they don't sneak anything off the floor. That's the only way it makes sense, because there's no other way for them to get that note. Mark's Audi clearly never got the letter, because if he got it, he would have read it and he would have known something was up. I'm starting to think maybe, just maybe, they never actually get to leave. And that's where the perpetuity floor comes in. We don't have too much details about it, but what we do know is that Lumen keeps some people here at all times. So what if the entire new team that Marcos had was just a backup team being kept on the perpetuity floor until they were ready to replace whoever was on Mark's floor, which would make a lot of sense since the innies don't remember anything that happens after they step into the elevator. For all they know, they could be stepping into an elevator, going downstairs, and never actually coming out, which ties directly into the new orientation video that Mr. Milchick was showing Mark's old crew. The fact that they're now revered as heroes to Lumen, but for some reason, Mark's new team didn't revere him as such. And that's because I think he was lying. Since while watching the orientation tape, Mark's team and his uprising was known as the Micro Data Uprising, almost as though Lumen was glorifying the fact that their secret and shady practices were exposed. I don't know about you guys, but if you know anything about corporate America, they never want their secrets exposed and they never take kindly to it. So the fact that they're revering these four makes it seem oddly suspicious. You tie that in with the fact that after the orientation video was said and done, everyone started sharing their information about what they learned on the outside world. Mark is being Mark. So he was truthful and told them everything he knew about his life, his brother-in-law, his wife. But when it came to Helly, Helly lied to them. Remember last season, Helly was this close to exposing Lumen, but we also found out her Audi was on the board of Lumen and is directly involved in what's going on with Severance. And instead of telling Mark and the rest of the crew that, she kept it to herself and said she didn't find nothing, almost as though Helly is now working with her Audi to make sure whatever the experiments they're doing in here is actually working. I wouldn't be surprised if Helly and her Audi are the ones who came together and came up with the whole concept of this new orientation video, because remember, she was the one trying to save Severance and make it what it is and expand it even more. So now I'm definitely not trusting Helly, because I think she's hiding something way more sinister and she's not telling us. Because not only does Helly have her secrets, Irvin initially had his, but he told Dylan about everything that happened between him and Bert. But when it comes to Dylan's secret meeting with Milchick, the fact that Milchick brought him in, he was the only one who didn't go outside and see his family. And Milchick saying that he's turned a new leaf and he's operating differently than Miss Corbell, not only did he give Dylan the name of his wife, he also gave Dylan the hope that they're creating a mysterious family reunification room in which Dylan can meet his Audi's family. But that doesn't necessarily work because his Audi's family doesn't know this version of Dylan. They only know the Audi version and not the innie. So I think that's just a way for Milchick to pacify Dylan and get Dylan to work with him, because he also told Dylan, don't tell the others about it. So you see how the lies and the secrecy are starting to spread, and it's all coming from Mr. Milchick. So even though he's coming off as a positive guy and he's more reformist than Miss Corbell, we see something beneath the surface bubbling when it comes to Milchick. Especially when he's just staring at the screen and Miss Corbell's name is just flashing across the screen. We know she's going to be back this season, because one thing we know about Miss Corbell is she's persistent and she always gets the job done. And I think we'd be remiss if we don't talk about Miss Young. The fact that they have a child working here, Lumen has crossed over and started employing children. Wow. So not only are they okay with stripping humans of their consciousness and their memories, they're now employing child labor. And they're not even treating her right, because Mr. Milchek is treating her like garbage and she's just a child. It made me think though initially that Miss Hung might have been Miss Casey's daughter, but Mark said his wife died about 2 years ago, so there's no way that makes sense. That was my initial theory when I first saw her, but that just doesn't add up. What it does do is set up the stakes for the rest of the season, because the final scene was Miss Casey flashing across the screen. So that tells us that this season is going to be about rescuing her. And I think Miss Hyung is going to work with Mark and the team. But it's kind of weird because Helly is on the opposite side. Dylan has his own thing going on. But we see that Lumen is also making Miss Hung work on her computer. It looks like a simple computer game, just like whatever they're doing on MDR looks like a simple computer game, but it's all part of Lumen's experiments. So maybe they're trying to find a way to implement more child labor because kids are more agreeable. Kids themselves don't like school or work. So if you could severance a kid from going to school or severance them from going to work, I feel like they would love their social life and all that works together. But I'm more confused than ever. I'm excited and I have a few theories that I want to formulate before I give them all out to you guys. So definitely hit that subscribe button. But guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts about Severance Season 2. What do you think about this season? Did you enjoy the first episode? And what do you think is going to happen? Let me know in the comment section below. And don't forget guys to give this video a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button. And until next time, peace.